the last year, unemployment has risen everywhere, but more so among the youth. Already prior to the crisis, the youth were 3 times, worldwide I'm speaking, 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. ILO estimates that in 2009, the number of unemployed young people will be between 78 to 90 million people, as compared to 72 million in the year 2007. So the world's young are especially hit with today's crisis. Now, this amounts to a great loss. We have loss in individual hopes and aspirations of young people. We have a loss on tapping of the economy, tapping on the productive capacity of young people. And I guess there is some societal loss, a weakening in society where we have youth who are living without a lot of hope. This book comes to confirm to us a lot of things that we worry about as international organizations, as national organizations, as governments, is that education, we still have a problem with education, whether it is access to basic education or whether the fact that higher education is not preparing people for jobs. We still have economies that have not created enough jobs for young people, even in a period where we had growth. Now, that was a missed opportunities when you look at the Arab region in the past few years. Or where there is growth, we call it in the ILO jobless growth, where it hasn't been job intensive. The book also identifies youth unemployment, but it tells us that actually unemployment is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problems. The problem is about employment in general. The problem is about labor market institutions. The problem is about educational systems, etc. Now, young people face problems in transition from school to work. This time, this transition is the most significant time in a person's career, whether it's a successful transition or not a successful transition, because it will affect all your future. A few years ago, the ILO did a few surveys called school-to-work transition surveys in many countries, but in the Arab region, they were in Iran, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. And we tried to ask ourselves, what is a successful transition and what is an unsuccessful transition? We wanted to quantify it. A difficult transition is those who are inactive, those who are unemployed, or those who are in a job but not a career job, whether it's a temporary job in the informal economy or they perceive it as not a good job and they want another job. And a successful transition, of course, is where you have a career job. In the countries we surveyed, 80 to 90% of young people had difficult transition. Now, this is pretty significant. So we might ask ourselves, what about those who are working today? You will find that finding a job is not enough, because a lot of people who are working might be in low-quality jobs, might be working long hours, might be under informal contracts, limited or no social protection, and even those who are in the private sector, let's say in good jobs, they might have minimal training. There's minimal investment in human resources development for career promotion. So this is why a lot of young Arabs choose to be unemployed or choose to be inactive and not look for jobs, because they actually want a good job. They want a job that will allow them the self-fulfillment, allow them the family formation that they actually deserve. So there's a lot. It is not always about the supply side. It's not always about youth preparedness. It's also about what kind of institutional mechanisms and incentives we are putting there. Finally, I was very heartened to see that the book addresses a lot of the gender disparities that exist in the Middle East. Young women always have higher unemployment than young men. In the Middle East, we have 29% difference between young men and young women's unemployment. Women face gaps at every stage. In terms of schooling, in terms of access to schooling and access to education, if you look at the vocational training systems in our region, you will find that they all provide male-oriented jobs. Women don't go into carpentry, women don't go into electricity. In Jordan, 2% of vocational training students are women. Once women, after the training, in trying to find job opportunities, they face blockages. They might be unaware of their rights at one. Two, employers see them, A, as more costly, because they will be having children, and that is maternity leave is costly. B, they might be also less productive because of family responsibilities. So as long as in the region we don't address the issue of workers with family responsibilities and address issues of maternity protection, women will always have a problem. And if the employer is always taking the cost of maternity and not the government, usually in the West is cost shared, then women will be more costly. The interesting thing is that employers are wrong, because women are having so much less children that they're actually not that costly. Finally, in the labor market, women face a lot of segregation, occupational segregation. If all women are bank tellers and all women are teachers, then they are competing among each other, and that is why the unemployment among women is so much higher, because they are limited to very few occupations. So that is where young women who have worked very hard to graduate from university find themselves in today, in limited occupations and not being able to manage family and work. In conclusion, I would like to go back to what Tarik said about that the World Bank seeing, it was an example, seeing youth employment as part of employment. I agree that youth employment is part of employment. Sometimes it's almost a natural phenomena for young people to face more problems than adults in labor market entry. But when we look at solutions, it's actually every country needs to have a policy mix. What is general about the economy, about job growth, job creation, and what is specific for the labor market insertion of young people. And this policy mix between macro, micro, each country has to decide what is the mix. So there is no prescription when we talk about policies. There is no prescription. And each country, according to the economy, according to what they see the future of their labor force, should develop this policy mix. My final point is that when we talk about solutions and policy approaches, we really need to remind ourselves that young people are not homogeneous. We always tend to fall in this. Young people are women, are men, there are people who are disabled, there are young people who are working children and now trying to enter the labor market. There are young people who are farmers, children of farmers. There are young people who are children of migrants. And each segment of these young people have really different needs. So thank you.